Alrighty. Well, after some technical
And that's
difficulties,
quicker than 10
um,
seconds.
oh yeah, some technical difficulties are other normal co-hosts not showing up, other things. We're finally ready to go. I decided that it was too cold outside to do the podcast as normal because winter decided that in May it would make a shocking return, and in Arkansas we got snow. Let me get that down here. Snow in May in Arkansas. I I don't know.
First time in recorded history.
Uh-huh. I don't. I Why? This is Arkansas. I moved here from Kansas expecting May would be summer slash, tail end of spring, and I wouldn't have to deal with snow. In Kansas, I'm used to just snow just showing up, that and tornadoes. But I kind of figured that this kind of thing would come to pass. Except, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. I mean, they did blow the tornado sirens on campus in January, so I don't know. I really don't know what to say about the weather here anymore. I thought Kansas was all over the place, but apparently Arkansas is more crazy than crazy.
Well, it's not just for tornadoes. That's the complete severe weather program.
Huh. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'd like to personally thank our guest co-host tonight, Kevin, good friend of mine who's as politically crazy as I am. Last night we had some technical difficulties with our normal co-host Michael, and then apparently again tonight he was having technical difficulties again, so I took the liberty of bringing in someone else so we could have a show tonight. I know Kevin isn't normally well known by some of our normal viewers, so Kevin, if you want to take this time to kind of give a quick brush over your political affiliations, if you have any, and your political beliefs for our viewers.
Well, at this point, my political beliefs range somewhere along the lines of I don't care whether you have a D, an R, an I, or whatever piece of the alphabet you want to put after your name. Just do the job and stop being an idiot.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, there are not too many of those out there, so I'm kind of alone in left field, as it were.
Well, I mean, I can appreciate that because, I mean, when I was in political science, I was always shocked.
I did have to pick a political party. I'm more libertarian than I am any of the majors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was in political science, that's the one thing I hated was that apparently the biggest thing that decided what people's voting would be was based on whether you had an R, a D, or whatever by your name rather than based on any political philosophy.
And first of all, these political philosophies that have got us into this wonderful situation that we tend to stay in for the last 2 decades or so.
Yeah. I think this picture right here that I have screenshotted best exemplifies your opinion on the current government situation.
Yeah, I was pretty much wishing I could click yes on sending them to the recycling bin.
Yes, the picture doesn't work. But anyway, I interrupted you, so go ahead. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, you're not interrupting me. Like I said, if anything, I'm a libertarian, and honestly, in my view, it's been the political wrangling and beliefs and ideology that have gotten us to a point where neither the government works or anything else seems to work correctly because everybody's more concerned about their ideology than getting things done to help make things work better.
Yes. Wow, this is going to be an even easier show than when Michael's here because usually, even though Michael's tends to be liberal, he espouses himself as a bit of a fascist. But this is going to be an even easier show for me because we'll be sitting here going, yep, because we're both libertarians. But
well, if you want a fascist, I do have a buddy of mine who was in the military who is a card-carrying fascist. I'm sure I can find a way to get in touch with him.
Oh no, that's quite all right.
Point too, that he is a card-carrying fascist.
Oh my, yeah. See, he's at least one of those legitimate. legitimate people. Where I mean, he's tried going to some of the fascist parties, and then he realized just how racist they were, and was like, no. I like the government philosophy, not so much that you don't like people in general that aren't white.
Yeah, I can see that.
See, I really don't. This is me. If it wasn't for their political philosophy, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with fascists being in charge, because I'm white enough to be white that I will never be bothered. So, I mean, I've got that perk, but unfortunately, I really don't care for fascism.
But of course,
no, go
of course,
ahead.
my friend does look like he walked right off of a recruiting poster for the Third Reich. But
alrighty, well, we got that settled. I had some topics. Yeah, I had some topics in mind, but that kind of devolved as things went on. Though I did see some videos on YouTube. I'm going to play those really quick and get into them, because it kind of has to do with one of the topics I had planned, dealing with CISPA and all that, because we thought it died back in 2012, and apparently it's back in the House after passing the House and failing in the Senate last year. So, oh, all the fun and joy that comes with that. Let's get back to screen share.
Well, the joy of it coming back is quite simply the fact that enough people have enough money to push towards it to say that, yes, we still need this to happen. Unfortunately, Hollywood has deep pockets, whereas the rest of us don't.
Well, that's usually the way it is with politics, and the reason why we have the Constitution set up the way we do to protect people's liberties, because not everyone has deep pockets and the time to constantly spend defending their liberty. So we put limits on the government. But anyway, here's the first video. Let me set this to record my my desktop so we can actually hear the lovely noises that will be coming out of my computer.
You can start by paying the newspapers. You can start by paying the magazines. As we see magazines erode, as we see journalism destroyed, as we see newspapers destroyed, and we see their houses get bigger, their planes get bigger, and bigger and bigger and bigger. The octopus is assembled. The cool thing is, they're all my friends. But I promised myself that if Obama won, and I worked hard to make sure, with a lot of other people, to make sure he did, that I would be free to do that. And George Clooney will, and there'll be 100 of us who will too. But let's now that battle is coming now, and we thank God we have people like Senator Dodd, to help lead us and also to help finesse that battle, because they're stealing. That's what they're doing. So, my artists, they can't be artists if they're hungry. I mean, the starving artist, you're not, trust me, that's a myth. When you're starving, you're starving. It's hard to be creative in that situation. So, let's keep it up the score.
And the other one.
The bigger question, and Senator Don and I have talked about this quite a bit too, is I work with directors, I work with actors, I work with artists. I'll give an example. Chicago, the movie, Richard Met. If you go to YouTube, you can download 9 songs. The movie, there's like 13 songs in the entire movie, and pretty much watch 70 or 80 minutes of it. Nobody's getting paid for that. Can't enter an ad with composers, nothing. Rob Marshall, the director, nothing. We as a studio, nothing. So I think a very good business plan, I'll give you a very creative business plan. Use somebody else's content for free, whatever, deliver it, don't pay them anything, and build a $500 billion Silicon Valley company, whatever, and be very, very rich, and then have cool slogans like, we just want to help the world, Okay.
I can't believe he would seriously believe what is coming out of his mouth in this video.
And YouTube is saying either, because I mean, I don't know if you caught it while I had the screen cap up, because but between the two videos there's like, so we're looking at about 60 or 70 thumbs down compared to a total of 9 thumbs up. I mean, then again, it's the internet, so they're going to, of course, defend with.
I did see that. At least right, that means that there are some people that know that at least know that they're full of it. I mean, yeah. Hollywood's been like this for years. I mean, ever since the digital age began, Hollywood has not figured out how to adapt to it, whereas all they particularly want to do is keep with the old ways and punish any type of new innovation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he talked about how, you know, oh, my artists are starving, and, you know, artists can't work when they're starving. You look at the independents, the ones that aren't, you know, normally aligned with the different, you know, media outlets and the industry as a whole, and they do just fine on YouTube. I mean, it's not like you can't make money. They have a sharing program. I mean, it's free publicity. I mean, it's been proven time and time again that the most people who torrent, who go to YouTube and watch these videos, they go out and buy the movie anyway. I mean, it's not like you're not getting any profit off this. It's like free advertising that you don't have to pay for because someone said, cool, I like this. I mean, they're down with the Twitter, yeah, the Facebook, and all that stuff. But they don't understand that they're also getting free advertising off of this stuff on YouTube because these people come back and buy the real thing. They don't just torrent it and then go, well, I've got my movie, because 9 times out of 10, the DVD package offers better features and other things that you can't get with a torrent. It's basically free advertising.
Exactly. I've had people give me movies and things like that on, you know, sites like that. They've burned them to disc. But I've gone out later and actually bought said hard copy of movie or TV series because, well, one, I'm a special features whore. I love special features. That's why I buy movies other than seeing them in the theater, because I want to know more about behind the scenes, what went into it, special effects shots. It's stuff that fascinates me, but you can't get that if you're torrenting or whatever service you care to use. You're not always going to get that. And when you do, it may not even be a good version. You may have to actually still go out and buy it, which most people I know, that's what they're going to do anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you talk about
I know very few people who just want the digital pirated version and are happy with it.
Well, and a part of the problem that I think is starting to be addressed with like Netflix and Hulu and sites like that is a lot of people, they don't want to go out to the theaters anymore. They are quite, and being, you know, gouged on popcorn and soda pops that they could get at a gas store down the street and then just watch the movie at home. The digital media has rapidly changed how people consume media content, and people don't just want to. I mean, they're much more happier watching it at home with their family rather than going out to a theater. And the movie, the people in Hollywood, like you said, they don't like this change. They want things set up the way that it used to be, and unfortunately, technology is going to keep marching on to the point that there's no way that you can stop this. There's going to be no stop to this. The consumers are going to get what they want, or, you know, we're going to have the situation where that we have right now, where they're going to keep lobbying Congress, and eventually it's going to get to a point where something's going to have to change.
Yeah, and that's where it's at right now. They either need to adapt or adapt.
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise, the punitive fines they put on people for downloading music, for downloading movies. First off, these are average people that are being put through. You know, the last one I saw is like a 7-figure penalty for 7 or 8 songs, which is utterly ridiculous. The average person, you're lucky if you're pulling down a 5-figure income in this economy, let alone 6 or 7 digits.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not punishing anyone except your customer base. And the more people see this, the angrier they're going to get at Hollywood for pulling this kind of stuff. And eventually they're going to start seeing their market share shrink further and further and further till there's nothing left.
Yep, and then things will just change at their own accord. Now, we also have the same thing with the video game industry. It's a lot more different, but we also have like a digital management where like both EA and Blizzard have gone to the like always online DRM, where you have to be logged onto a computer and online, have an online connection to their servers in order to be able to use the material, which doesn't always work because servers are down. Like if you get the game on launch day, good luck playing it. You're not going to be able to, and as that was shown with SimCity and other things like that. And it's very easy to hack the game and remove said content. And it's also much easier if you just get the torrent for it. It comes out probably a day later. Sometimes people are even able to smuggle it out pre-release, where it doesn't matter. I mean, you get around it, and that's going to be the problem. Either the companies are going to learn to deal with this new medium and adapt to it, or they're going to lose all their market share to the pirators, who are A, giving away a better product and giving it away for free.
Exactly, and that's where I have personal issue with EA and Activision and groups like that who are trying to push the always online stuff, because it's a way they see it as to protect their properties, but at the same time, you're hindering a big chunk of the market, because let's suppose someone buys, let's just say the next Call of Duty. That's been the big thing lately, so we'll use it as the example. And suppose they don't have an internet connection on their gaming console or something like that. So if you have to be always online or something to be able to play these games, what's that going to mean for the people that don't have the internet connection, who don't care about playing online?
I mean, exactly. That's always the problem I've had is, I mean, even in a developed country like the United States, internet connection isn't universal. I mean, before a couple of weeks ago, when I got mine free from Cox, I was borrowing the internet connection from down there in the clubhouse. I mean, we effectively had no internet, and I mean, I know I've done some shows off of that connection, and I mean, some people have seen the quality. I mean, the last time, the first show we did 2 weeks ago, I lost connection in the middle of the show, and we had to reset back up the Google Hangout because the internet connection died. I mean, internet connection is not universal, and even smaller of a market is a good enough internet connection that you can stay online and have enough bandwidth to run a game like, say, a Call of Duty, which you're connecting to servers and having to jungle multiple players at the same time. Some people's internet connections just can't handle that. I mean, I know people who are, God forbid, still on dial-up. I feel pity for those people who want to be able to game in such a fashion where always online DRM is the mainstay. I mean, you're killing large chunks of your market share trying to do that.
Yeah, you are. And that's something else that they don't understand either, is there are still parts of this country where you are stuck on having dial-up service versus having any type of high-speed connection. Mm-hmm. And again, this still continues to go back to my point that they need to evolve into the digital age and find out how to use it to their advantage instead of using it to put their boot on the throat of their customers.
Right. I mean, I know it's very easy to set from our thrones and say what the problem is. As far as solutions, I mean, it's just offering a better service. I mean, I watched a video by from the Jimquisition. I can't remember his last name. I know it's Jim because it's in the show's title. It's on The Escapist, where he's talking. All you have to really do is provide a better service than the pirators. I mean, people didn't think that Steam could go into Russia, which had this horrendous problem with pirating of video games, and be able to make money. Yet they did, because they provided a better service. Yes, they had their Steam server, which is a bit of is a part of digital rights management, where you have to have a username and be connected, be able to buy it through there, so that way that keeps it from being torrented and everything like that, or pirated and all that. But I mean, if you just provide a better service which allows your player base to get the game they want without impairing their ability to play the game horribly, there's a market for that. I mean, the same thing happened with iTunes. You don't see quite the popularity you did with LimeWire and other places like that once iTunes came out, because not everybody wants to buy a whole CD and pay $15 for a CD. Maybe there's like only 3 songs on the CD they like, but they can't do that. And iTunes gave an opportunity for you to spend $1.99 and get the songs you wanted off the album, rather than having to pay for the whole album. But it still allows you to buy the album if you wanted the album.
Which is a valid point, but we've also seen with iTunes and what has become of it lately, they've upped their prices and everything, which is why a lot of people are starting to go to these other services that don't charge these exorbitant fees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because my roommate has iTunes, and most of the stuff that they want to download used to be, $1 a song. Now it can range anywhere from $2 to $3, depending on who the artist is.
Yeah. And I like I said, I think a lot of our things that could lead to helping fix this problem is just looking at the indie development of things. Is they found ways to make it in this digital age, and I think a lot of these large recording studios, the movie studios, all these things are going the way of the dinosaur, and they don't like that. And I think the only way that we can move forward in the digital age is somehow minimize their political power so that we can move on, because at this point they're the only ones that are impeding progress. And until they realize that their time is numbered and find different ways to make it in this new media, maybe they make a competitor to iTunes, or maybe they make a competitor to Netflix or something like that, where they can distribute their videos directly. But I mean, at this time, I mean, the movie studios are on the way out, whether they like it or not. And eventually we'll see this point when the market share drives up for them, and they either adapt or they go bankrupt. One of the two.
Exactly, which brings me to the next thing that bothers me with Hollywood pushing this whole CISPA issue, and why it keeps coming back, regardless of how many times we think we've, slain the dragon, or, killed Jason Voorhees, or what have you. The problem with it is, and this is not so much a problem with the legislation itself, other than the fact it is bad legislation, but the fact they're trying to trick the American public into believing that this is to help them track terrorism and prevent terrorism. Well, protection is all well and good, but if I personally don't like the idea of giving up my freedom for security. I don't like the idea of Big Brother, being over my shoulder 24/7. To me, that violates the entire principle that this country was founded on, of personal liberty.
Indeed. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I have a feeling this will come up multiple times throughout the show, but I mean, even our founding fathers did not appreciate the thought that, you know, somehow giving up our liberties for security is going to somehow change things. And I believe I saw a poll. Now, I'm not a big fan of polls because there's multiple ways you can twist those and everything. And uh, Penn and Teller's bullshit did an episode on numbers and did an excellent throwing down of how polls are completely worthless. But it showed back in 2001 that, you know, after 9/11 happened and everything, that 70% of the American public roughly was totally behind, you know, throwing away liberties in the name of self-defense. And now we've come back since then, realized it's not that big of a problem, and the poll has shifted, is 95% in favor and 49% against. So there's some people who still, you know, are on the fence on that. But I mean, I think people are starting to realize that, you know, sacrificing everything at the name of the altar of protecting ourselves from the evil terrorists is not going to, you know, help us at all. It's just not going to change anything. America is a very safe country, and we have few liberties as it is, since, you know, some due to 200 years worth of government encroachment. We don't need to be giving more to that dragon.
And that I agree with. A good buddy of mine, right after the whole 9/11 incident, said that, mark my words, because people are afraid that this happened, that this could happen again, they will give up their freedoms for the false sense of security. And that's what a lot of this is still driving, is because people think that if the government is watching out for them, they will be safe. But the truth is, the government is not who you need to be looking for to help you stay safe. That's your own personal responsibility.
Exactly.
Whether or not you believe that, you know, Ali Wali Akbar or whoever is plotting the demise of this country somewhere in a cave versus some guy here who is, you know, religious zealot of some type. We don't need to name names. There's dozens of groups, and I can't even think of any off the top of my head I care to talk about.
Yeah.
Are plotting to change the world to fit their view by using the government as that tool to change things.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Either way, it comes down to people need to be responsible for their own safety and everything, and be aware of what's going on. Just because the government says that everything is safe doesn't mean everything is safe.
Exactly.
I mean, you go back in time now, and you ask anybody alive then, on December 6th, 1941, hey, is America safe? Are we good to go? Are we going to have to worry about anything? I guarantee you, very few people would have said that, no, we're not safe, because the illusion is created. Now, the morning of December 7th, you ask that same question, people would have said a different answer, because people react. They don't act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's been proven time and time again. If you look at anything throughout history, when some horrible event happens, people react to it. They don't act according to what happened. They act out of primal fear.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think that the next topic we have is something that might be of a little interest. I had this debate with a friend of mine, not the Michael from the show. I know too many Michaels. Or Michael Perkins, a friend of mine. It had to deal with maybe something that
you
would
got
be...
the same problem.
Yeah, I know too many people with the same name, but that has to deal with the issue of campaign finance reform and that kind of shtick. So maybe we'll have some divergent views here. We'll get to see what your view is on it. It's kind of an old video and an old topic, but it was something that he had brought up with me, and I thought it'd be interesting to check this out. So give me a few seconds to switch up my audio again and all the screenshot, blah, 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 blah.
Liberal Viewer presents.
So based on the comments and messages I've gotten from viewers asking me to make this video, some may be surprised to hear me agree with a recent holding from the U.S. Supreme Court declaring, quote, the government's corporate identity, unquote. And that may be because I've seen some mischaracterize this ruling as being about whether corporations are red. If you want to, then at least for those purposes, to be legally treated like people.
The head malfunction in our wonderful world of science.
Well, it's been a trend tonight.
Liberal Viewer presents.
So based on the comments and messages I've gotten from viewers asking me to make this video, some may be surprised to hear me agree with a recent holding from the U.S. Supreme Court declaring, quote, the government may not suppress political speech on the basis of the speaker's corporate identity, unquote. And that may be because I've seen some mischaracterize this ruling as being about whether corporations are persons, and that's something of a red herring because first, if you want to be able to sue corporations or charge them with crimes, then at least for those purposes, corporations need to be legally treated like people. And secondly, corporations have never had all the rights of a person because corporations cannot get married, cannot be murdered, and have no right of habeas corpus. And finally, and maybe most importantly, while corporations are not actually people, they are associations of people, and those people still have free speech rights, which is, again, why the Supreme Court held that when those people speak, quote, the government may not suppress political speech on the basis of the speaker's corporate identity, unquote. And my agreement with this recent decision by the Supreme Court not only separates me from some of my viewers and some of my friends on the left, but it puts me in agreement with people with whom I don't normally agree, like South Carolina's Republican Senator Jim Let's Break Obama DeMint, appearing on ABC's This Week last Sunday, who was apparently so used to insulting the Democratic Party by calling it the Democrat Party that he actually insulted the democratic process itself, as you can see in this clip.
We can't promote freedom and democracy by repressing free speech. That's not the way to do it. I think people should be able to come together in associations and organizations and spend money to get their message out. I think that's going to promote the democrat process instead of really what we've got now is we essentially give the labor unions carte blanche over our system, grassroots as well as spending. I think this will give businesses a chance to participate in the process as well as associations.
Now, I actually agree with the first half of that statement, all the way up to where he referred to the Democrat process, though everything after that was pretty much wrong. And the misanalysis of this issue seems to come from all sides because ABC political analyst Sam Donaldson, later on that same ABC program, spread a common misconception about the Supreme Court ruling, claiming it allows unlimited corporate contributions directly to political candidates, as you can see in this clip.
Here's what the Supreme Court has said. Let's take Mr. Blankfein, who's in charge of Goldman Sachs. He can only give $2,400 of his own money directly to a candidate. But now Goldman Sachs can give millions directly.
Yet even when ABC host Jim Moran interrupted to correct Sam Donaldson by pointing out the ruling does nothing to remove limits on contributions to candidates, but actually removes a law against spending by corporations on certain kinds of political expressions in the 60 days before an election, Sam Donaldson somehow ended up back making the same erroneous point that you can see here.
But they can spend it and say, this man, Barney Frank, has gone too far to trying to restrict us. Let's defeat him. Vote for X. But Blankfein can't give $2,400. Now, what sense does that make to say that a corporation, a legal entity, has freedom of speech to give all this money, but I don't?
But again, individuals can spend unlimited amounts of their own money on political expression and even on their own political campaigns, which, by the way, has never guaranteed victory even for independently wealthy candidates like Ross Perot, Steve Forbes, and Mitt Romney. And more importantly, the corporations that are going to want to spend money expressing political opinions are not going to be the big blue chip firms that want to stay away from controversy and sell to everyone. the people who will most likely be freed up to speak for corporations will be speaking for nonprofit corporations like Planned Parenthood, the NRA, and the Sierra Club, a point conservative columnist George Will made in that same ABC discussion here.
Some people say, well, corporations, that means Microsoft will be buying ads. Microsoft's trying to sell software. They're not interested in getting into political fights. What this really emancipates are nonprofit advocacy corporations, such as the Sierra Club. I picked that not at random because the Sierra Club was fined $28,000 in Florida last year for falling afoul of the incomprehensible, that thick set of regulations on our political speech.
So this Supreme Court decision did strike down a significant regulation on political speech, and George Will's point that big for-profit corporations won't want to make controversial political ads got support from, of all places, The Daily Show, where Jon Stewart and his writers generally seem to disagree with the Supreme Court decision, but still made the parody commercial showing why corporate advertisers won't want to get political that you can see here.
What's up? It's me, the E-Trade baby, here to tell you about the stock market. Because I wasn't aborted. You know, think how much money you would have lost if I'd been aborted and wasn't here to tell you about E-Trade. So don't vote for Dianne Feinstein. You know, she wants me dead.
At E-Trade.
That is a cute baby!
And I think that cute baby demonstrates why for-profit corporations are generally going to be interested in, well, profit, which won't come from making partisan ads, but of course, that's not to say that corporate money doesn't already have a big warping influence on the way political decisions are made in America, but that has more to do with the lack of a public financing system for campaigns than it does with any independent expenditures by outside groups, which is why law professor Lawrence Lessig, who spent a lot of time in the copyright area fighting for fair use, starting up the Creative Commons system, but who's now started the Change Congress group dedicated to limiting the influence of financial contributions on congressional decision-making, and who initially reacted to his first reading of the Supreme Court decision last week, vlogging in an airport to say,
I don't think the point here is that corporations should be silenced. I think the point is we need a political system where people can trust that the decisions Congress makes are decisions based on the merits, on what makes sense or what the people in their district want, and not what the funders demand. This decision will only exacerbate the current problems with the system. And the way we should respond is by pushing for an alternative that gets us a system for funding elections that doesn't lead people to wonder whether it's money rather than sense that is producing a political result.
And Professor Lessig had a specific piece of legislation in mind that's already in Congress that he went on to describe here.
The Fair Elections Now Act. This would establish citizen-funded elections, where candidates can receive up to $100 from any citizen and also money provided from the state whenever they establish certain credibility in a campaign. If we had that alternative, even if corporations were participating in the political speech market by saying whatever they wanted to say, people could believe that it was the merits of the decision and not the money that was driving the result.
And that's generally been my reaction too, but unfortunately by this week, Professor Lessig had actually changed his mind, sending out an email in which he not only continued advocating for the Fair Elections Now Act, but in which he also now calls for a constitutional amendment because of his fear that an activist Supreme Court might strike down any reforms. But I'm very hesitant to monkey around with the First Amendment for any reason, and my worry is only increased by the report in the New York Sun last weekend that the American Civil Liberties Union held a national board meeting to consider changing its campaign finance policy, despite the ACLU having submitted a brief supporting the winning side in this recent Supreme Court case. Now, the ACLU has been the nation's leading advocate for First Amendment free speech rights for the last 90 years, and I've been a member of the ACLU almost a third of that time, so when the ACLU considers changing its policy, just like when a learned professor like Lawrence Lessig changes his mind, it certainly makes me reconsider whether solving this problem just through the public financing of campaigns is a realistic hope, and that hope was not encouraged by the way President Barack Obama addressed this issue in his otherwise pretty good first State of the Union address that included a vague mention of a bill to correct these problems that you can see here.
With all due deference to separation of powers, last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections. I don't think American elections should be bankrolled by America's most powerful interests, or worse, by foreign entities. They should be decided by the American people. And I'd urge Democrats and Republicans to pass a bill that helps correct some of these problems.
The president kind of trailed off there at the end and didn't even mention the Fair Elections Now Act or anything specific, leaving me with little hope he's going to be leading an effort for public campaign financing anytime soon. But I'm still not giving up, and I'm still not convinced that ACLU policies or the U.S. Constitution need any changing, but I want to know what you think. Is the public financing of political campaigns the best hope for limiting the influence of money on politics while still protecting the First Amendment freedom of speech? And if not, how would you suggest limiting the influence of money on politics in a way that would not suppress anyone's right of free speech? I YouTube.
Open the floodgates of special interest, huh? Well, I hate to tell you, Mr. Obama, but you're a little late to the party on this. Floodgates of special interest in government alone have been open since, I don't know, since we started playing around in politics in this country. Can't hear a word you're saying, bro.
But still, so there was our problem. Well, like I was saying, it's like it's a tricky issue. I definitely agree that there's an issue here, but I don't know what you could do to stop it. I mean, I hesitate to make government tend to hate to have government the source of fixing the problem, because we don't have money to spend on what was advocated in the video, where you have people able to give a limited amount of individual money, and then people can you know, the state government funds elections, or the federal government if you're running for a federal office. We quite frankly don't have the money to do that kind of thing. We're barely being able to afford what we already have to begin with. And like I said, I had on seen on a video once talking about campaign finances. It's really hard to fix these kinds of things because they use the example of a balloon, and if you squeeze one end of the balloon, all the air goes to the top, and if you squeeze the other end of the balloon, all the air comes to the other end. So it's one of those things that it's tricky to get the results you desire, especially when, even if you did have that, you still have the ability of advocacy groups, advocacy corporations, groups of people being able to affect the political process, not directly by giving direct money to candidates. That's still regulated, but indirectly being able to say, well, here's what I believe. And I don't think there will ever be a good result that doesn't also violate the First Amendment.
I think you're right in that. I mean, this is honestly a very complicated issue that has no real good solution, because you either completely remove corporations from being able to make donations as an entity, or you make it to where if you outlaw the corporations to put money in, then you're going to have things like unions and, like you said, advocacy corporations, advocacy groups, things like that that are going to be able to circumvent the law, which is where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. Now, I personally don't like the idea of businesses being able to dictate donating money to candidates. I think it's just bad practice, because business and politics, to me, should not coexist in the same direct sphere. Mm-hmm. Business is business, government is government. Now, big corporations, which we all know who they are, not all of them are interested in what political candidates do. But there is a growing number now who, because they are reaching out and pulling more types of business into what they're doing, are becoming more concerned about this. I don't really think the government's the solution to solving this problem, nor do I think that business is the solution. This is going to have to be one of those issues where people are going to have to come in from both sides and find a common, agreeable middle ground. Mm-hmm. I mean, personally, I don't know. I don't like the way the system is set up for campaigns as it is, because you have to have so much money already to be able to get into it to begin with. For most people, you can't do it. So it stays in the realm of the rich being able to run this country. Mm-hmm. So as long as you have money, you can run. But I think both sides need to find some type of middle ground. Now, as to what that is, I think that's going to take years to figure out. That's not going to be a quick fix solution, even within a decade. I figure you got 20, 30 years before somebody figures this out. And it'll be brighter minds than ours who will find it.
Yeah. I'd hesitate to ban corporations being able to donate to and contribute to political campaigns, because once again that gets in the middle of the First Amendment, in my opinion. If we're going to say that advocacy groups, corporations, things like that can donate independently, I mean not donate independently, but independently do their own campaigning, whether that's for a person or for a policy or whatever, it makes no sense to ban them from being able to donate. But I think that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that would be a fix to it, where they're not as influenced, because it's the people that are only able to directly contribute to the politician, but while still allowing a group like, say, the ACLU or the Sierra Club or the NRA being able to say, we believe this is the policy that should be enacted. We believe that this is the person that should be elected. And it's not as direct like we have right now, where advocacy groups and different corporations can directly give funds to politicians. And speaking as someone who has run for political office before, another thing that Michael had said was how hard it is for independent candidates and groups to get their voice out because of this ability to basically, for corporations and advocacy groups to to get into the dish out money, and these people get drowned out because they're not so well known. And I tend to understand where he's coming from on that, but I kind of have to go back to the video where it said that, you know, the amount of money you have, you know, does not guarantee that you will win an election. I mean, Ross Perot was independently wealthy in his own right, yet lost to Bill Clinton in the election in '92. So, I mean, it's one of those things that's tricky, and you've got to strike a balance with. I mean, there's no black and white to it. There's a lot of things that are moving here, and it makes it very hard to make a sound policy that would be able to fix the problem.
Yeah, and that is true. And there have been several not even several highly wealthy candidates. They're all wealthy because they all have money somewhere that's allowed them to be able to put the cash out there to run. I think what really needs, as a common sense thing, and like you said about being third party, having a tough time getting your message out, I think that is something that is legit, because there is, and I hate to touch on this, because it's one of my pet peeve issues, the whole media bias. Because quite frankly, there is a media bias in this country. It's a media bias for the two big dogs in the field. Everybody else, well, sorry, we can't really cover you. You're not brand recognized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think part of that problem comes from how our political system is structured. A lot of people care about federal elections. They don't care about state and local elections. And unless you can get elected on the federal level, the news doesn't care about you. No one cares about you. And the only way to get elected on the federal level is to be one of the two big parties, because our current system is a two-party system, you know, through the Electoral College, where it's basically you have to get half of the vote or we don't care. I think it makes it very hard for third parties, for people that are independent thinking, who are outside of the Republican Democrat sphere of things. And I think what it comes down to, if we really want to see the political change that we want, we have to change how the political system works. I think we could keep the Electoral College. It's just the requirement for like 250 electoral votes or whatever it is in order to be able to become president needs to change, where it makes it much open and much more able for people to be able, who are in a third party or independent candidates, are able to make that maneuver, because they don't need 50%. Now they just need a majority quorum, and it would make it a lot easier for people. And I think it would open up, we would have less of this media bias where people are only covering the two main parties that can get elected to president, and you have a much more open approach. I think our problem necessarily isn't campaign finance, it's more with how our government is set up. And if we want to get past that media bias and get past those problems, then we have to start looking at ways that make the political system more accessible for those third parties.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
Well,
but you know, campaign finance is one of those issues that, you know, we're heading into a midterm election next year that's going to play political hot potato for the next 6 months or so.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that are going to be political hot potatoes. Like I know we had covered it with Michael, but I just like to quickly maybe get your opinion on it, since I'm running out of show topics. And this would give me a chance to scramble around and maybe find some more. But I know we had talked about guns, gun control, gun regulation. I mean, that had recently failed, and there's a lot of parents from the Sandy Hook tragedy who are really upset about this. And I'd like to see if I could get your take possibly on your thoughts on guns, gun regulation, all that different things.
Careful what you wish for, Chief. As far as gun control goes, when you break it down and look at all these mass tragedies dating back to when I was in high school with the whole Columbine incident.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of the starting point when all these mass things really start hitting the media. We're not looking at an issue of needing more legislation to solve the gun problems in this country. The Second Amendment is one of those amendments that there's a lot of irony on the political parties about this, because a lot of them, they see the First Amendment as sacrosanct. You cannot violate this. This must stay the way it is. But the Second Amendment, they're like, no, this needs to change. And I don't see any purpose in changing it, because we have the right to bear arms. It does not say muskets. It does not say handguns. It does not say rifles. It does not say whatever. And this is where certain people in the media, not to drop any Piers Morgan names. Piers Morgan! So we're on the same boat there. Yeah. But there's a difference between trying to help keep these things from happening in the media and letting the world know that, yes, these horrible things have happened, without giving these, I hate to use the term monster, because we can't really judge these people without knowing what's going on up here or in here. We don't know. So I guess the people that are doing these, we have to look at why. There's always more to the story than what is being reported. And also, none of these gun control things that they have even begun trying to pass and that failed would have stopped any of these tragedies. Because, again, tell me how criminals obey the law.
They don't.
Exactly. And most guns, this whole background check thing is not really going to help things. Because all you're really doing is this ridiculous kindergarten mentality of a few people screwed up, now we have to punish everybody. No, that is not how it needs to roll. The way we have more gun control laws in this country, I think, than, I don't know, China has human rights violations. I don't know. But something around, the count's like 25,000 to 200,000 gun control laws in this country.
Yeah.
That is an immense amount of laws, and I guarantee not all of them are being enforced. But you can't do a knee-jerk reaction to banning certain types of weapons just because one person does something. I mean, that's not how it needs to be. Background checks, fine. You can run as many background checks as you want on people who are law-abiding citizens. But what's to stop that law-abiding citizen from having their house broken into and their weapons stolen and filing a police report about it? The police never find the guns, and 2 years down the road, said guns are used in a mass shooting.
Yeah.
You cannot predict what could happen. It comes down to what we've created in this country, and it's something I really have issue with, is we've created a culture of fear based around weapons. People don't need to fear guns. They don't need to fear knives. They don't need to fear baseball bats with nails in them. What we need to do is teach respect and how to use these weapons, as opposed to, oh no, that's bad, don't, no, bad, can't do that. You should be afraid of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think I'm off base on that, but a lot of people do feel that I'm off base and saying that we need to have these type of things going on.
Mm-hmm.
And half of the gun bills that have come out, especially out of Feinstein, the wonderful person that she is on not knowing what she's doing.
Well, she's from California.
One of the restrictions in her gun control bill makes it a banned weapon if it has makes it a crime to have a gun with a detachable magazine. Because that's a military characteristic. Unless you're carrying around a revolver or, a bolt-action rifle, every weapon has a detachable magazine.
Mm-hmm.
My own personal gun has a detachable magazine. How do you classify, making everybody carry around revolvers when I mean, that's what it would boil down to, is revolvers and bolt-action rifles.
Yeah.
And you can do as much damage with a revolver as you can with an automatic, as long as, the caliber's large enough and you know where to aim.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's to a point now where it is really creepy that we're trying to pass this UN gun treaty. I mean, if you sit down and read this stuff, it drains the blood from my face, as scary as it is. I mean, we need to realize that the solution lies with education and teaching people and making sure that people who are mentally unstable or have something like that, like a violent felony or something like that in their background, we do make it harder for them to be able to get these weapons. But unfortunately, that's not what anyone wants to do. They want to just slap a ban on everything. And I have to say, when it comes to banning things, need I remind anybody of prohibition and how well that worked out for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of the problem that we have is that there are too many people who think that there's a simple solution to everything. And with politics, that's not the case. Every person that I have talked to about the gun issue, they agree that that keeping the guns away from criminals or people who are not mentally stable or who are not capable of honestly being able to carry a firearm is something that we should prevent. I think that's something that we all agree on, and the only problem we have is the method of doing it. And like you said, banning firearms doesn't change that. I mean, I have a wonderful video that basically elaborates that gun control, banning guns doesn't change that. And I mean, people like to point out at UK for having all these gun laws and a low violent crime rate, but really what it boils down to in this video, it explains comparing the amount of gun regulation the United States has and the violent crime rate, and comparing the amount of gun regulation the UK has and their violent crime rate historically across time, comparing it against themselves. And what you see is, despite the lack of the United States gun laws, that, I mean, we had this uptick during the 60s and 70s in gun violence, but that had slowly been decreasing. We're down almost to the historic lows of the 1950s, after World War II. And meanwhile, the UK has introduced all this gun regulation over the last 100 or so years, and their violent crime rate has gone up. If your policy, if you're attempting to stop, I'd assume that this is what your goal is to stop violence against other human beings, gun control doesn't stop that. Gun control just changes the method in which people use to create these violent crimes. And even then, like you said, criminals don't obey the law for rape, murder, and anything else. Why do you think that they're going to follow a gun ban? They're going to find a way to get the tools that they wish to use, no matter what the law says. And finally, a last point I'd like to mention is that these mass shootings are a very minority of the violent crime that actually happens in America. Even violent crime use, it's a huge minority. It is a very small percentage of the crime that actually takes place in the United States. And I'm not trying to deny how tragic and and trying to make it seem unimportant, but when you're looking at violent crime as a whole, or even gun crime as a whole, it's not a big thing. And a lot of people like to point towards an assault weapons ban, but that once again, that's a minority of the actual violent crime, the actual gun crime that happens in the United States. It's one of those things that, like I said, there's a lot of gray area. There is no one-stop solution that's going to solve this problem. At the end of the day, the policy that I would bring forward is about, you look at the UK and the United States, and the UK has less industrial areas, less large metropolitan areas than the United States has. And when you look at metropolitan areas, whether it be the United States or the UK, the universal problem there is poverty. And if you really want to stop violence, gun violence, crime, or anything like that, the issue you have to tackle is poverty. And if you want to tackle poverty, you have to have good education. You have to have a means by which these people can escape poverty. So once again, the issue isn't going to be fixed with a gun ban. The issue isn't going to be fixed with, you know, regulating guns or anything like this. If you really want to stop crime in metropolitan areas, you've got to stop poverty first.
And I can definitely see the point in that. And this actually, that brings up two separate points that kind of coincide with this debate. Also, you have the incidents in Aurora, and you have the New Mexico shootings with Congressman Giffords, I guess.
Yeah, Congressman Giffords.
If you look at the two suspects on that, I kind of have to say a lot of that went to dealing with the simple fact, with the whole thing of the consequences of having a 24/7 media coverage of everything that happens in this country. If you look at those two guys and what they did, these guys were acting pretty much if they wanted that they knew they could get their 15 minutes of fame out of this. And that creeps me out to a whole new level of creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, the way the guy looked at his mugshot from New Mexico, it's like, hey, look at me, guess what I did? Yeah. And the guy from Colorado, I'm sorry, he made himself out to be able to get out of that alive with the body armor and everything like that. He was not going in there and not coming out. He was setting it up for basically what was going to be his 15 minutes of fame. And the more we continue talking about this stuff, the more it lends to the shooters that survive into their 15 minutes of fame. And that's a sad commentary that people have to do stuff like this to get that 15 minutes of recognition. I mean, it bothers me, but, you know, it is the price we pay for having a 24/7 media coverage in this country. Now, on the second point, we're talking about poverty. This brings something that I have considered a problem in this country for a long time, is we are more apt to want to give money to people overseas who are quote-unquote suffering or something like that than we are giving the same amount of money to people in our own backyard who are suffering just as much as the people overseas. I mean, we have a huge amount of starvation in this country that could be completely avoided if we would, you know, use our resources towards solving the problem versus giving money to governments overseas to help them solve that problem. But most of the ones that are overseas, they really don't care. The money goes into the pockets of the people in power. It never actually sees where it's supposed to go. I mean, we've seen this time and time again. I mean, it shouldn't be news to anybody, but yet we seem to have a very, very short attention span on these things.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we would spend just half, even, of the money we send overseas to help reinvigorate the poverty-stricken areas, to help people get back on their feet the way it's supposed to work in this country, instead of some guy come over in, you know, middle of nowhere Eastern Europe, you know, giving his government $2 billion to, you know, prop up whoever's in charge and not give the money to the people that deserve and need it.
Yeah.
I mean, foreign aid, I hate to say it, is one of those issues I really think we could really, unless it's an actual disaster, I think we should just cut the purse strings.
Yeah. Well, I don't agree with foreign aid in the first place, because more than less, we send money to tons of countries. There's very few countries that we don't send some sort of foreign aid to, and most of the time, especially in Africa, we send the money directly to the government, right? Directly to a dictatorship that uses the money for whatever needs or things that they feel necessary, rather than to the people who are actually affected, to the people who are actually having to deal with poverty. There needs to be a drastic restructuring of how, if we continue to do foreign aid, how we do foreign aid. But like I agree with you, I don't think we should be doing foreign aid in the first place, especially when we have people at home suffering, unless there's some sort of, like you said, natural disaster. And also on that count, private charity does way better than any sort of government money would at eliminating poverty, because first they bypass the government structure, they go directly to the people, and it eliminates all this government waste that happens in the process of delivering this government money that is collected via taxpayers to these people overseas. If you want to really get at poverty, I would strongly suggest things like the Red Cross, rather than, you know, trying to say foreign aid is going to fix all of our ills, because it really doesn't. It really does not. In fact, I also have looking at the data when it comes to charity. You also see a problem, a trend with those that are giving as far as political, I'm not political, but private donations and stuff like that. You see that the highest group, the one that gives the most in charity, is always the poor, because they're always willing to help other people because they're in that same situation. The next group is the wealthy, because they have all this extra money that they can give to help others. And the middle class, strangely enough, is the group of people that gives the least to charity. And it's always puzzled me greatly that people who still have disposable income who could give to charity are actually the people who give the least to charity, and are usually the ones that advocate the most for government welfare, government foreign aid, and other things like that, when they shockingly themselves stay the furthest away from giving private aid to organizations, while still advocating that people are money hoarders and don't give money to charity and things like that. And it just really confuses me. I know when I go to, like, I see it all the time here in Arkansas, and even when I was in Kansas, people who stand out and have these charity things out in front of Walmart or whatever, Supercenter and everything like that, and I'm always willing to give, you know, if I have a couple dollars laying around that I'm not using, to give to other people. And maybe it's just me, maybe that, much to my detriment, that I believe that people are good on the whole in the world, that it always surprises me when I see things like that, of people that are unwilling to give to charity, or unwilling to fix some of the societal ills that we have.
Well, a lot of that, I think, can go back to what's considered indoctrination, because there are, and I heard this growing up, and I do have some years on you, so I can, you know, say this with some confidence, that growing up, going through the system and everything of, you know, church and school and things like that, a lot of it is indoctrination to telling you that you should advocate these things to happen, but you shouldn't have to throw your money into it. It should be a group effort, but it's never a group effort. It's always a group effort to try to get these things passed, to get these programs working. But those with disposable income, that they don't want to give it because they feel somebody else will do it. The second part of this, also from my perspective, is over the last 20, 30 years, we've seen so many charities pocketing so much of the money and not sending it to where it needs to go. People also become jaded on it. Mm-hmm. I mean, we saw this with the 9/11 fund. We saw this with, you know, so many other organizations over the years for these, you know, tragedies like the tsunami and Haiti earthquake relief. We've seen so much of this money, the organizations just either pocket to what they consider expenses, or to general operations. They dump it into a general fund instead of it being sent to where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. So you have this indoctrination and jaded factor that most people look at, that, well, yes, I have extra money, but why should I donate it when I know that it's not going to go to where it needs to go? Mm-hmm. And that is an unfortunate tragedy. Now, me personally, when I can, and I don't have a lot of disposable income. At this point, I don't even have any income. What am I talking about? But I try to find a way to donate to some organization who's collecting money that, you know, I can guarantee that it's going to go to where it's going to go. For instance, anytime I buy dog food, you know, I go down there to Petco. They ask me, you know, do you want to buy a can of dog food for the local shelters? And you know what? I do it every time. It's not something I have to do, but I will go down there and do it because I know that can of food is actually going to go to where it needs to go. It's not going to be just shuffled aside somewhere. And I try to make sure that when I am donating things to charities, that I know it's going to go where it needs to go. And there are just a lot of people that don't want to take the time to research these things and be like, okay, charity A shows me where every dime I donate goes to. Well, charity B just says it will go into a general fund to be dispersed amongst everything that we're doing. But we're not going to show you where it's all going.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing when it comes to charities that we're seeing does really need to be changed if they really want people to donate in large quantities. I mean, yes, the rich have plenty of money to donate because they're going to get that money back on their taxes when they claim it. I mean, it's a wonderful little loophole for them.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the things that that I may be a libertarian, but I think that's a responsible use of government, keeping these people responsible through the court system and things like that, so that these kinds of things are avoided, because it does destroy the structure of how things work as far as helping our fellow man, helping other people who are in need. And it goes back to that major problem that we have. I remember even you agreed with it when I posted it on Facebook about people being ignorant to things that are going around them because they feel that being ignorant is okay, and it really is not. We live in a society where politics, that not even just politics, but the things that you purchase, where you send your money, you need to be actively aware of what you're doing and not be intellectually lazy on these issues, because it's important to everyone, and multiple people and a vast group of individuals being ignorant of what is going on around them causes problems, and it's very disturbing to understand that people have just detached themselves from that and think that that's a good thing that will lead to future prosperity, and it won't.
No, it won't. And that's why I do enjoy the term, and even though it was someone who's very conservative that came up with this term, I think it's very apt to that type of mentality that we have, the low information voter. Because instead of being well informed on what's going on, they're more concerned with, well, who's going to win Dancing with the Stars tonight? Mm-hmm. Who's going to win American Idol? There was a wonderful Facebook post that made circuit through my friends. I don't know if I think I copied it to you. I'm not 100% certain. But they had the poster showing Einstein, Tesla, Carl Sagan, Stephen Hawking on one side, and on the other side you had one of the Kardashian sisters, Britney Spears, Nicki Minaj, and I forgot who the fourth one is. And it said, if on the side of the scientists, if you don't know who these people are, but you know who these people are, you're part of the problem. Now, I don't foresee it being part of a problem, but I do see it as, one side does need to be known, whereas most of the other side can pretty much be forgotten for the betterment of society. But again, that is my personal opinion and a lot of opinions of people I know, because I've always tried to pride myself when I go to vote and things like that, is that I've researched the candidates, I've researched the issues, I've looked into it deeply enough to where I have an understanding before I go and, push the little button for what I'm voting for. And I guess it's just a dying thing these days. I know so many people over this last election cycle that I asked, well, did you vote on yay or nay on blank? And they say, well, I followed it in the news media, and they said it was a good thing, so I voted yes for it. Well, do you know what was in it? No, but they said it was a good thing, so I just figured they know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And that right there made me want to Gibbs slap them until I developed carpal tunnel syndrome. And I'm like, well, who did you vote for Congress or whatever? And they're like, well, if it was a Democrat, I voted for them. Or if it was a Republican, I voted for them. Well, what difference does that make? Do you know where they stand on issues, what their record is, whether or not they are capable of doing the job? And the number one answer that most people gave me is, well, I can't bring myself to vote for the other party.
Yeah. And that's a sad commentary on how things work. Like I said, I mean, it's not like you need a political science degree to be able to think intellectually politically. I mean, it's just a simple thing. There are many organizations on the internet. There are many groups, that go over people's voting records and narrow it down so it's easy to understand. They voted for X. This is what X was. Their voting record, what their stance is on all the issues and everything. It's not hard to be an informed voter. It just takes time, and sadly, people don't want to spend the time thinking about that. And what they don't understand is that politics affects your life every day. I mean, I watched the HBO special where they did the thing on John Adams, where John Adams' wife said, "You don't think I live politics? The fact that I don't have food in my cupboards, the fact that, I don't have pens to write letters to my friends, that's politics. Your politics affects me in this way every day." And what people need to understand by their choice of not being part of the political dialogue is that they're deciding that they don't want to be part of the process that affects their lives daily. The fact that you aren't able to go out and to be able to speak freely, that's politics. The fact that you aren't able, that you go out in the store and you buy your food and they hiked up the sales tax and that food is 10 cents more to buy, that's politics. And what people need to understand is that politics is something that you need to be educated on, because every single decision that you make in your life is affected by politics, whether you like it or not. So to be educated on politics is something that is a necessity, especially in a country like this, especially in a republic that we have, where the people have a voice. It is something that needs to happen daily, that you need to be informed on the issues, because each and every day politicians are making decisions that affect your life.
And that's part of the problem is, and I quote Geddy Lee from the super band Rush from the 1970s. Yeah, I know, dated reference, I got it, blah, blah, blah.
No problems.
But there's a song lyric where it says, even if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what it boils down to, is whether if you decide you're not going to get involved, then you've made your choice. Whether it's for good or ill, you've decided that you don't want to get involved, and that's just going to lead to somebody else basically being able to override what you might think needs to happen with what they think would happen, just because they've got involved in the process.
Mm-hmm. All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to decide to do nothing. But anyway,
yeah,
I think we've talked on.
And when it comes to so many of these people saying we can't do this, we can't do that,
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked enough on the gun issue, because it's slowly devolved into.
I can't hear anything, but the visuals are quite entertaining. It's like, I'm going to move something from over here.
But one last topic. I think it's going to be our last one. It depends on.
Well, isn't that what good debate is supposed to do? Is to be able to transpose from one issue into another. I mean.
But anyway, this may be our last topic, depending on how long this goes. But I don't know how well you've been following it. We brought up the issue last show of the current civil war that's dragged on for 2 years, that is now going on in Syria, and that now the current government in power in Syria has used chemical weapons on its own people, and that it's been confirmed both by the Israeli government and the American government that chemical weapons are currently being used, and that President Obama said that that was the hard red line, that if chemical weapons were used, that the U.S. government was going to get involved militarily or whatnot. Now, recently, I think it was back on Friday or Tuesday, or not Friday or Tuesday, Friday or Thursday, sometime during the week, that Obama said that he didn't want to limit himself, but that American boots on the ground was not going to be the decision he was going to make. There had been a lot of murmurs in Congress going about that, should we send boots on the ground? How should we deal with this issue? The current policy that seems to be going is that we don't have to put boots on the ground. We'll just give the rebels guns, but only certain rebels, the right rebels that aren't the terrorist rebels that are fighting in Syria. And now we're in this complicated mess that we backed ourselves in the corner saying we're going to help with this revolution if chemical weapons or anything like that's going to be used in Syria. And now it's kind of in this messy situation now of, well, we've made this promise, now what are we going to do? And I'd like to get your opinion on it because, once again, I've already stated my opinion. I just like to see what you have to say about it.
When it comes to this whole situation, and unfortunately this has been a trademark of this administration. I mean, people can say what they want about, Bush dragging us into wars we didn't need to be in and conflicts that we had no purpose in. This administration, unfortunately, seems to like the idea of saying that we're going to do something and then suddenly backing off and saying, well, we don't know if we can really do that. We're not certain. I mean, Obama is kind of like the UN in this regard. He continues making threats and putting a line in the sand, but nobody wants to actually take any action on it. It's like, here's the line in the sand. We're not crossing this line. Well, no, now we're not crossing this line. Now we're not crossing this line. The civil war in Syria has been going on for 2 years. It is accelerated into something that is no longer just an internal matter for Syria, because it is spilling over into other parts of that section of the world. It's causing lots of trouble. Now, I applaud the Israelis for, finally, when their backs are against the wall, doing something. It's like, hey, somebody's got to do something about this. I mean, the sad thing is, we do need to get involved. If chemical weapons have been used, I'm sorry, I don't care if China says don't do it. I don't care if Russia says we don't do it. Once that line has been crossed, somebody needs to step up to the plate and do something about it. Chemical weapons, like biological and radiological weapons, will spread. It is not a one-time use thing. There will be consequences spread out amongst years. And this has been proven. I mean, look at the use of mustard gas back in World War I. How many years were we dealing with that problem? With the side effects of people that were near it but not fully exposed to it. It's a dangerous business. And it's something, chemical weapons are one of those weapons I really don't believe anybody has any purpose in developing or even using. But we need, with Syria, we don't need necessarily to put boots on the ground, per se, but we need to step in and either arm all the rebels or don't arm any of them and put boots on the ground. I think the best option is we're going to have to go in there militarily. I know that no one wants that because we're just coming out of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the military is rather exhausted, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. They've been fighting a war for 10 years. They're exhausted. You can't keep going and expect them to be honky-dory 100% fine. But Bashar has shown that he now has no respect for anyone or even any basic human life if you're using chemical weapons. The time's come for us to man up and do something about it, regardless of what that is, whether we go in with NATO, whether we go in with UN peacekeepers, or if we just have to go in ourselves with the Israelis to put this into a lockdown situation. Because it's not going to get any better. It's not going to resolve itself. It's going to continue getting more violent and will spread to other parts of the region. Yeah. It's like a wildfire in California. It may start in California, but by the time you're done, it could be in Nevada, it could be in New Mexico. I mean, we've seen them spread before. It will happen. And that's kind of what we're looking at, is a war situation that is akin to wildfire. If you ignore it, it's just going to keep spreading. But if you keep setting a line in the sand and keep moving it back, you're not helping the problem either.
Right.
So we have to do something about it, regardless of whether we do it unilaterally or if we have to go in with somebody else, with our allies, and do something. 2 years is too long for this kind of conflict to have been going on with no end in sight.
Mm-hmm. And like I've said in the previous episode, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I tend to avoid wanting to deal with wars. I mean, I'm a bit of a history buff, and especially dealing with war history and the effects of war, and I kind of like to watch YouTube and watch the different, things that have happened over the course of history, dealing with wars and everything. And war is a very inhumane, very bloody, costly affair that destroys not only human spirit, but morale, economic development, and everything like that. So war is something that we should take pains to avoid. But when it comes to chemical weapons, when it comes to people trying to overthrow a dictatorship that has brutally oppressed people, who put snipers out in the streets to kill people who may not even be involved in the conflict, may not even be rebels themselves, to lock down their citizens in such a manner, to torture, to kill, to use biological weapons. This is where I believe that the United States should step in, and I don't think we should necessarily have to stay there to clean up. I think that should be on the rebels once they have, garnered their new government. I think it should be up to the rebels how they shape their government. But whether we decide to go in with boots on the ground, which I would hope we would try and avoid, I would much prefer the method of we send our Air Force via airships, via warships, via aircraft carriers, and do strategic bombing, or send guns and military assistance, not just guns and stuff, but food, medical supplies, weapons, things of that nature to the rebels to overthrow the government. It's gotten to that point where America, as a free nation, we not only need to do it for the regional security, but for our own nation's security, and to get those chemical weapons off the playing field. It's just abhorrent what is going on in Syria right now. And especially since you've made this promise that if X happens, we're going to do Y. If you've made this promise, it needs to happen. And I mean, I've been slowly watching this over the time that it's been going on, and wondering, as someone who, as much as getting involved would cause human life and devastation, that's already happening. I think that if there is a way to stop this quickly, that it should be taken to minimize the loss of human life. It's abhorrent to everything that I think America stands for, and I think that not doing something in Syria will only lead to more problems, more bloodshed. And I agree with you, whether it be boots on the ground or supporting the rebels, there needs to be something done by the government as far as it's concerned, and just based on American tradition of us supporting government overthrows of governments that are totalitarian in nature, that abuses the liberties of the people and uses such abhorrent things like chemical weapons on their own people, that we have a reason to be there. And I think that we should work with NATO. I don't know so much about the UN, because like you said, the UN likes saying things for the purpose of just saying things. But I mean, if we could get NATO involved, if we can do something like we did in Libya, I think that would at least minimize the devastation to an already devastated country and region.
In that, I think you're right. It would change the playing field. But we do have lots of options, and this goes back to what I consider the clandestine days of the CIA and our special forces. We don't have to do anything overt in this situation to help end this. We could go completely covert like we did years ago. We were that
Afghanistan
specter in the shadows that, we're not directly helping you, we're not directly hindering you either.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if we find out where he's got his stockpiles and things like that, we send in a ghost team to go in and, blow it up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as we can minimize our risk to help them get there, I think that's the best option.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds kind of callous that I would want to minimize our risk, but the fact is, it's really not our war. But,
right.
We do need to help end this.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, we could always go the option like we did in Afghanistan when the Russians invaded Afghanistan. We didn't put boots on the ground. We indirectly through Egypt, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan, we funneled guns across the Pakistani border in Afghanistan to help the rebels. I'd hate to inflame this region even more because there's political strife, and there always has been in the Middle East. But it was very effective how we managed to grind out the Russians to where they were not able to continue to do
operations. It's a powder keg.
Yeah, and I don't think that it necessitates troops on the ground. I think that we can do a very covert operation now. It can't be very covert anymore because we've already expressed interest in it and have been discussing the possibility of sending assistance to the rebels. But when you have a nation like Iran sending funneling munitions and stuff already over to Syria, at what point is the American public going to realize that there needs to be some sort of American involvement in Syria?
Probably when most of them see it is it affects our backyard directly. Mm-hmm. And that's sad commentary as well.
Yeah.
But I do feel something has to happen. I mean, we already know that we can't do it the same way that we did when the Russians invaded Afghanistan because the geopolitical climate over in that region of the world has shifted so dramatically since then. It's kind of hard to pick who's going to be on our side afterwards and who's going to turn the weapons we gave them on to us. I mean, it's a very difficult climate over there to try to give these weapons to. I mean, it's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. And that's why I said, I like the idea of sending, SOG teams and things like that to go in and disrupt things on a level of disrupting infrastructure, logistics, things like that, that the Assad government has to rely on. The rebels aren't as reliant on having the infrastructure as they are because they've found ways to work around it without co-opting their operations. Mm-hmm. But it's something that they don't have, nice, shiny, big target bases that you can see from the sky. They don't have stockpiles, training grounds, anything like that that you can fly a drone over and go, oh, hey, I can see that over there. That's what we need to bomb. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big fan of regime change as it has been because we haven't always made the right choices. But, that's the gambler's curse. You're never going to make the right choice every time. But I think if we do get involved, we need to make sure that if they do topple Assad, that we either let them handle things the way we let the Iraqis handle Saddam, or we just we take him and put him in jail in The Hague and let the world court do whatever they're going to want to do with it. Mm-hmm. Because we can't, it's one of those things, leaders like him you cannot let become martyrs to a cause.
Right.
I mean, we've seen that time and time again being students of military history. I mean, how many years did they keep going around with Ferdinand in Spain where there were news reports every night that he is still dead? I mean, come on, that's kind of the same thing we're looking at here. Is as long as people think that he got away or something like that, there's always going to be that specter of resurrecting the revolution to try to take back what they lost.
Right.
I mean, same thing happened when Hitler died. I mean, we had so many people claiming to have seen him, to have talked to him, to have watched him leave the country and things like that. To the Russians claiming that they had him, when the truth of the matter was he was dead in a ditch in Berlin, and the SS burned the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said, it'd probably be best to do a non-boots on the ground issue. We don't, not even necessarily supporting the rebels, but like you said, strike teams and maybe airstrikes. But it's definitely a very trying situation there, and hopefully things work out. But I think we'll be wrapping up this show tonight. I want to again thanks to Kevin for coming in to being a co-host on short notice and working through some technical difficulties with microphone and all that jazz and everything. So definitely we'll keep in touch in case a situation like this materializes again, or maybe we'll have like a panel show next.
The ominous eye versus me. What can I say?
Maybe we'll have a panel-like show next time with the three of us. Maybe then I can like double team Michael or something. So
I'll be more than happy to participate. This has been a blast.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, I'll catch you guys next time, next week. Hopefully it'll be Saturday instead of Sunday, and we'll catch you folks.
Hey, let me know. I would. This has been a blast. I would love to keep doing this anytime you want me, man.
Yeah. Well, now you understand why I like doing it all the time. As we like to say here, the verbal masturbation is comforting. Anyway, well,
it gives me somewhere where I can actually say things and not create the apocalypse that I usually have to create with certain people around my house, and I can't open my mouth on any view without getting shot at verbally.
Yeah.
And I can say that because they're not here.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Hope to see you watch the recorded show on YouTube/users/Nightwatch show. Keep updated on our Twitter. We usually have some sort of news updates that happen, and we also have a Facebook page. So we hope to see you again next time. Thanks for coming.
About behind the scenes, what went into it, special effects shots. It's stuff that fascinates me, but you can't get that if you're torrenting or whatever service you care to use. You're not always going to get that. And when you do, it may not even be a good version. You may have to actually still go out and buy it, which most people I know, that's what they're going to do anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and you talk about
I know very few people who just want the digital pirated version and are happy.
Well, and a part of the problem that I think is starting to be addressed with like Netflix and Hulu and sites like that is a lot of people, they don't want to go out to the theaters anymore. They are quite, and being, gouged on popcorn and soda pops that they could get at a gas store down the street and then just watch the movie at home. The digital media has rapidly changed how people consume media content. And people don't just want to. I mean, they're much more happier watching it at home with their family rather than going out to a theater. And the movie, the people in Hollywood, like you said, they don't like this change. They want things set up the way that it used to be. And unfortunately, technology is going to keep marching on to the point that there's no way that you can stop this. There's going to be no stop to this. The consumers are going to get what they want. Or we're going to have the situation where that we have right now, where they're going to keep lobbying Congress, and eventually it's going to get to the point where something's going to have to change.
Yeah, and that's where it's at right now. They either need to adapt or adapt, because otherwise, the punitive fines they put on people for downloading music, for downloading movies. First off, these are average people that are being put through, the last one I saw is like a 7-figure penalty for 7 or 8 songs, which is utterly ridiculous. The average person, you're lucky if you're pulling down a 5-figure income in this economy, let alone 6 or 7 digits. And you're not punishing anyone except your customer base. And the more people see this, the angrier they're going to get at Hollywood for pulling this kind of stuff. And eventually they're going to start seeing their market share shrink further and further and further till there's nothing left.
Yep, and then things will just change at their own accord. Now, we also have the same thing with the video game industry. It's a lot more different, but we also have like a digital management where like both EA and Blizzard have gone to the like always online DRM, where you have to be logged onto a computer and online, have an online connection to their servers in order to be able to use the material, which doesn't always work because servers are down. Like if you get the game on launch day, good luck playing it. You're not going to be able. Alrighty. Well, after some technical difficulties.
That's quicker than 10 seconds.
Oh yeah, some technical difficulties are other normal co-hosts not showing up, other things. We're finally ready to go. I decided that it was too cold outside to do the podcast as normal because winter decided that in May it would make a shocking return, and in Arkansas we got snow. Let me get that down here. Snow in May in Arkansas. I don't know.
First time in recorded history.
I don't. Why? This is Arkansas. I moved here from Kansas expecting May would be summer / tail end of spring, and I wouldn't have to deal with snow. In Kansas, I'm used to just snow just showing up, that and tornadoes. But I kind of figured that this kind of thing would come to pass. Except, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. I mean, they did blow the tornado sirens on campus in January, so I don't know. I really don't know what to say about the weather here anymore. I thought Kansas was all over the place, but apparently Arkansas is more crazy than crazy.
Well, it's not just for tornadoes. That's the complete severe weather program.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'd like to personally thank our guest co-host tonight, Kevin, good friend of mine who's as politically crazy as I am. Last night we had some technical difficulties with our normal co-host, Michael, and then apparently again tonight he was having technical difficulties again, so I took the liberty of bringing in someone else so we could have a show tonight. I know Kevin isn't, normally well known by some of our normal viewers, so Kevin, if you want to take this time to kind of give a quick brush over your political affiliations, if you have any, and your political beliefs for our viewers.
Well, at this point, my political beliefs range somewhere along the lines of I don't care whether you have a D, an R, an I, or whatever piece of the alphabet you want to put after your name. Just do the job and stop being an idiot.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, there are not too many of those out there, so I'm kind of alone in left field.
Well, I mean, I can appreciate that because, I mean, when I was in political science, I was always shocked.
I did have to pick a political party. I'm more libertarian than I am any of the majors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was in political science, that's the one thing I hated was that apparently the biggest thing that decided what people's voting would be was based on whether you had an R, a D, or whatever by your name rather than based on any political philosophy.
And first of all, these political philosophies that have got us into this wonderful situation that we tend to stay in for the last 2 decades or so.
Yeah. I think this picture right here that I have screenshotted best exemplifies your opinion on the current government situation.
Yeah, I was pretty much wishing I could click yes on sending them to the recycling bin.
Yes, the picture doesn't work. But anyway, I interrupted you, so go ahead. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, you're not interrupting me. Like I said, if anything, I'm a libertarian, and honestly, in my view, it's been the political wrangling and beliefs and ideology that have gotten us to a point where neither the government works or anything else seems to work correctly because everybody's more concerned about their ideology than getting things done to help make things work better.
Yes. Wow, this is going to be an even easier show than when Michael's here because usually, even though Michael's tends to be liberal, he espouses himself as a bit of a fascist. But this is going to be an even easier show for me because we'll be sitting here going, yep, because we're both libertarians. But
well, if you want a fascist, I do have a buddy of mine who was in the military who is a card-carrying fascist. I'm sure I can find a way to get in touch with him.
Oh no, that's
brags
quite
about
all
that
right.
point too, that he is a card-carrying fascist.
Oh my, yeah. See, he's at least one of those legitimate, legitimate people. Where I mean, he's tried going to some of the fascist parties, and then he realized just how racist they were, and was like, no. I like the government philosophy, not so much that you don't like people in general that aren't white.
Yeah, I can see that.
See, I really don't. This is me. If it wasn't for their political philosophy, I mean, I wouldn't have any problem with fascists being in charge because I'm white enough to be white that I will never be bothered. So, I mean, I've got that perk, but unfortunately, I really don't care for fascism.
But of course,
No, go ahead.
My friend does look like he walked right off of a recruiting poster for the Third Reich, but.
Alrighty. Well, we got that settled. I had some topics. Yeah, I had some topics in mind, but that kind of devolved as things went on. Though I did see some videos on YouTube. I'm going to play those really quick and get into them because it kind of has to do with one of the topics I had planned, dealing with CISPA and all that, because we thought it died back in 2012, and apparently it's back in the House after passing the House and failing in the Senate last year. So, all the fun and joy that comes with that. Let's get back to it.
And be very, very rich, and then have cool slogans like, we just want to help the world, Okay?
I can't believe he would seriously believe what is coming out of his mouth in this video.
And YouTube is saying either because I mean I don't know if you caught it while I had the screen cap up because but between the two videos there's like so we're looking at about 60 or 70 thumbs down compared to a total of 9 thumbs up. I mean, then again, it's the internet, so they're going to, of course, defend what.
I did see that. At least right, that means that there are some people that know that at least know that they're full of it. I mean, Hollywood's been like this for years. I mean, ever since the digital age began, Hollywood has not figured out how to adapt to it, whereas all they particularly want to do is keep with the old ways and punish any type of new innovation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he talked about how, oh, my artists are starving, and artists can't work when they're starving. You look at the independents, the ones that aren't normally aligned with the different media outlets and the industry as a whole, and they do just fine on YouTube. I mean, it's not like you can't make money. They have a sharing program. I mean, it's free publicity. I mean, it's been proven time and time again that the most people who torrent, who go to YouTube and watch these videos, they go out and buy the movie anyway. I mean, it's not like you're not getting any profit off this. It's like free advertising that you don't have to pay for because someone said, cool, I like this. I mean, they're down with the Twitter, the Facebook, and all that stuff, but they don't understand that they're also getting free advertising off of this stuff on YouTube because these people come back and buy the real thing. They don't just torrent it and then go, well, I've got my movie, because 9 times out of 10, the DVD package offers better features and other things that you can't get with a torrent. It's basically free advertising.
Exactly. I've had people give me movies and things like that on, sites like that. They've burned them to disc. But I've gone out later and actually bought said hard copy of movie or TV series because, well, one, I'm a special features whore. I love special features. That's why I buy movies other than seeing them in the theater, because I want to know more. Well, the joy of it coming back is quite simply the fact that enough people have enough money to push towards it to say that, yes, we still need this to happen. Unfortunately, Hollywood has deep pockets, whereas the rest of us don't.
Well, that's usually the way it is with politics, and the reason why we have the Constitution set up the way we do to protect people's liberties, because not everyone has deep pockets and the time to constantly spend defending their liberty. So we put limits on the government. But anyway, here's the first video. Let me set this to record my my desktop so we can actually hear the lovely noises that will be coming out of my computer.
You can start by paying the newspapers. You can start by paying the magazines. As we see magazines erode, as we see journalism destroyed, as we see newspapers destroyed, and we see their houses get bigger, their planes get bigger, and bigger and bigger and bigger. The opposite of this is the cool thing is they're all my friends. But I promised myself that if Obama won, and I worked hard to make sure, with a lot of other people to make sure he did, that I would be free to do this. And George Clooney will, and there'll be 100 of us who will too. But let's that battle is coming now, and we thank God we have people like Senator Don, to help lead us and also to help finesse that battle, because they're stealing. That's what they're doing. So, my artists, they can't be artists if they're hungry. I mean, the starving artist, you're not. Trust me, that's a myth. When you're starving, you're starving. It's hard to be creative in that situation. So, let's even up the score.
And the other one.
The bigger question, and Senator Don and I have talked about this quite a bit too, is I work with directors, I work with actors, I work with artists. I'll give you an example. Chicago, the movie, Richard Met. If you go to YouTube, you can download 9 songs. The movie, there's like 13 songs in the entire movie, and pretty much watch 70 or 80 minutes of it. Nobody's getting paid for that. Cameron Ebb, the composers, nothing. Rob Marshall, the director, nothing. We as a studio, nothing. So I think a very good business plan, I'll give you a very creative business plan. Use somebody else's content for free, whatever, deliver it, don't pay them anything, and build a $500 billion Silicon Valley company.